It's late March 26, and I noticed this that the Department for Energy of UK have posted on X. Sometimes there is too much wind for our outdated grid to handle, especially in Scotland and east of England. Rather than paying wind farms to switch off, we are trialling a new system where people who live near these constrained areas get cheaper or even free electricity. And I just can't believe that we're in this situation. For me, mass migration is the main thing I vote on. In fact, the only thing. But I'm also very pro-renewable because it's win, 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 win. And so I don't fit with the right wing very much on this, like Reform or maybe even Restore Britain. I don't know their policy. But they all see renewables as a bad thing for some reason, even though they regard themselves as the entrepreneurs, the capitalists. They can see what the trend's going to be, but not in the case of energy for some reason. I don't know why, really. They're always going on about net zero's bad, etc. But I think also it's been very badly, by the left, it's been very badly promoted by the left and the centre-right, in that they're always going on about net zero and climate, and they're going on as if it's a stick, whereas really everyone should be green already, because you can get, if you had solar panels and a battery, etc., you could maybe be saving a third of your bill, a half of your bill. And now they're talking about, this has all come about, all this talk, because of the USA and Israel war in Iran, as I call it. Trump calls it a military operation, the same as Russia calls their invasion of Ukraine a military operation. But yeah, this is all coming about because of that. Now they're actually looking to see what answers there are, and it turns out that they're miles behind. Something like this. Can Nigel Farage be against this? He's always going on about there's not enough wind, and the wind, even when it's too high, the wind stops. He'll say stuff like that. Well, here's the reason why. It's because the grid can't handle it. And I think what's also happened is that the Tories banned onshore wind farms in 2015, basically not on logic, on, like I say, because the right don't like wind farms and renewable stuff. So England's miles behind Scotland. I think Scotland we're at 100% renewable electricity now, generated. And sometimes they switch it off. Well, I thought it was because the speed was too high for it or something, but it looks as if it's actually the grid just can't take all the excess electricity. So now what the Labour government are saying, rather than paying wind farms to switch off, we're trialling a new system where people who live near these constrained areas get cheaper or even free electricity. So there you go. Because of this, because we're linked to the international gas price, international oil price, even for our electricity, because what happens is every half hour, the retailers go to the market to buy electricity from the generators, and in the mix, it turns out that gas-powered electricity is the dearest. So wind is actually cheaper. I don't think Nigel Farage knows this. And like I say, I would vote Reform, Restore Britain on mass immigration. But this is why I don't agree with the party system and the party hamper system, because I agree with them on one thing, but not others. They would say the party hamper system's fantastic or whatever. How did they feel about Brexit? And what was Nigel's party called for the 2019 election? It was called the Brexit Party, and basically he was just using it as a referendum sledgehammer, even a one-issue sledgehammer, really. And of course he stood down to let the Tories win, Boris Johnson. But yes, so this is what frustrates me, because it holds back these kind of ideas. So I'd be interested in a journalism asking Nigel Farage about this. Apparently Scotland, I think, has the windiest. It's the windiest land area in Europe anyway, maybe even the world. I don't know, but whereas down in England, especially South England, it seems that solar would be the best option. And solar's not such a good option, they say, in Scotland at the moment. I mean, I think solar conversion of a panel is around about 22% at the moment, 23%. But personally, I think at the moment the government should be giving us all solar panels. You know, because a solar panel will put your cost down a bit, say 5%, 10%, whatever, 20%. But if you use that with a battery as well, then you're getting it even lower. And the person to look at for this is really Viktor Orban in Hungary. So I would like to see journalists asking Nigel Farage, because Orban went for a dash for solar in 2018. I'm not sure why, but you know, because you would expect him to be against it, but maybe he just looked at the logic. Apparently Hungary's a sweet spot for solar, the angle or whatever, I don't know. But whatever the reason, Orban went for a dash to solar, and now sort of like a third of their energy is, I presume home energy, is like solar powered with a battery as well, I think. So journalists should be mentioning that to Nigel Farage. What do you think of Orban's dash to solar? And apparently another country has done the same recently is Pakistan, because they were pretty dependent on, you know, fossil fuels. And then with that big price spike we had because of the Ukraine war, which affected the oil and gas prices, which affected the electricity because gas is part of our mix. Yeah, and it's the dearest, and so whatever's the dearest at the half hour mark, even if it's only 5% of the mix, they all get the same price. They all get the dearest price. So yeah, I'm not sure Nigel Farage knows that even as well. So Orban's got Hungary onto solar, and another country's done it is Pakistan. So they've done a dash to solar as well when the Ukraine invasion happened. So they're a way ahead of us. Germany's also started doing it, I think, at the Ukraine invasion, because before that they were dependent on Russia. They closed down their nuclear power plants in 2011, Merkel did, and made themselves dependent on Russia, or Merkel did. Who knows why? I mean, it just doesn't make sense, really. You know, they should have done a dash to solar. Now they're doing a dash to solar on... probably started under the SPD, probably the Ukraine war, but it's tragic that it takes, you know, some sort of world crisis for them to do common sense stuff that anyone sensible should see. And the two people we should listen to on this are, from the right, are Orban and Elon Musk, because he says you could probably power America, all its electricity on a solar farm, probably in the southwest of America, like 160 kilometres square. He reckons you could power the whole of America. So, yeah, we should be really listening to these people. I don't know why anyone wants to stick to fossil fuel at all. I mean, not only is it dirty, you know, I would say to Daily Mail readers, for instance, the way I would pitch it to them is, are you happy that Arab oil, gas sets our electricity and petrol prices? Are you happy about that? Or would you rather we were totally renewable, totally independent? We didn't even need oil fields to open up, because if the oil fields open up, in America they have an internal America price for oil. They've got their fracking now as well, so they don't even take exports, but they've got an internal market. Whereas in Britain, what happens is the more oil we drill, it then goes to the international market and it's set at the international price. So if the international prices went up suddenly, you know, from $80 a barrel of oil to £1.50 a barrel of oil, our retailers are still going to pay that $150. It doesn't matter if it came from the North Sea. So we're not going to see the benefit at all. And what the government usually do is they do windfall tax when when that happens. But I don't think they ever really get the money back that they lost, because apparently the Ukraine invasion price spike cost us around 70 billion because of the energy subsidies they gave. And ironically, I think the most generous one was Liz Truss, who was supposed to be the one who was, anti-nanny state, anti low tax and all that, low spend. Her thing would have cost, I don't know, 70 billion. But after her, Rishi Sunak came in and he made it a lot shorter. She made it like for a year and a half or something, but he made it for 6 months or something. But it cost us like 70 billion or something like that. And then windfall taxes, we maybe get back about 12 billion. I might be making this stuff up here, but this is my impression. The person I listened to on this is Dale Vince on X, if you follow his account. I would make him energy minister, even though I'm anxious about mass migration. And that's how I'm saying, I don't fit the right or the left or whatever on economics. I'm a lot of left. I believe in basic income. Elon Musk says it will actually, because of autonomy and robotics and AI, we're not going to have jobs anyway, but we will have basic, no, not even basic, we'll have luxury income, really, everyone. So, yeah, this is the sort of world we're moving into. I'm just looking at what Grok thinks about this. So it's an ex-post from the UK Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. See, I would stop calling it Net Zero, because that's what Reform use as a stick to hit voters with, saying it's a bad thing, Net Zero. Call it renewable, I don't know, lower pricing and independence, that sort of thing. So everyone looking at a net zero climate change thing, that's a mistake in my opinion. So that department's called the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, announces a trial offering discounted or free electricity to households near wind farms in constrained areas like Scotland and East England during high wind periods. So that's what they're talking about. Aiming to reduce constraint payments that cost consumers over $1 billion annually in recent years. So that's where there's too much wind, it turns out, and the government want them to switch off because the grid can't handle it, it seems. Especially between Scotland and England, there's not enough grid infrastructure, as far as I know. So even though we're generating too much wind, quite a lot, too much electricity, we can't get it down to England because of the grid. And what happens is the government pay them to switch them off. And that's costing us £1 billion annually in recent years. So, I mean, as Dale Vince pointed out, that's only about 1% of the cost, though, in terms of what it generates. So it's really a small part, but it's still £1 billion. And you could give that to free energy to people who live around wind farms. I mean, I think people who live around wind farms or solar farms should get a benefit out of it, to do away with the NIMBY thing. If they're against it, tell them, well, we'll give you free energy or something in the local area, something like that. This initiative addresses grid limitations from rapid renewable growth, where excess wind power is curtailed despite subsidies. Similar dynamic pricing has been piloted by firms like Octopus Energy since 2016, potentially saving £100 to £500 per household yearly if scaled. I never knew about that. I mean, that may be worth looking at, So nobody told me about that. I always look at the money saving expert or something like that for energy changes, but nobody told me that there might be a special thing. I think it was OVO Energy used to give you, if you had too much in your account, personally I tend to always have too much money in the account. I don't know why that happens, but OVO used to give you interest on it, and that was, at the time it was 3%, which was better than a savings bank. So literally with OVO Energy, it was better to have £2,000 in credit in your energy bill account at 3%, rather than being in a bank where you were getting maybe 1% or something, or maybe even less than that. That doesn't happen now, though. That's changed. They don't do interest, I don't think, at all anymore. So, and the replies people are saying highlight public frustration with intermittency and subsidies, so that'll be the right wingers moaning, proposing alternatives like battery storage. Yeah, I think we should definitely have batteries. Dale Vince says there's no need for batteries. He thinks if everyone has solar panels, that's enough. But personally, I would like a battery, which could cut curtailment by 90% per US studies, or hydrogen production, underscoring debates on balancing renewables with reliable baseload like nuclear. I mean, personally, I think if you get solar, the government just now should give everyone solar panels rather than an energy subsidy, which costs, well, like 70 billion maybe or something. Because long term, it's going to get our electricity bills down anyway, and we're going to be independent. Personally, I can see a time where we're all still going to be connected to the grid, but we're probably going to generate our own electricity most of the time, either via solar panels or battery storage, or in other ways. I'm not a fan of heat pumps. They only boil water to about 55 degrees or something, heat water, whereas gas heats your shower water to about 70 degrees, I think. So you need big radiators for heat pumps, and also what was I saying? Like, you need to be really well insulated as well. Dale Vince doesn't like heat pumps, although he's got one himself, and he says there is a place for them. But personally, I'm not very keen on them at all. But also, apparently, the Labour government have just announced that every new build home will need to have a heat pump in it and a plug so you can charge your car, electric car, that sort of thing. Solar panels as well, I think. And I think they're just making these announcements this week because of this Iran crisis. So this was always going to... Why have we always been dependent on the overseas oil price, etc.? And like I say, right-wingers, Daily Mail readers, they should be viewing it like, do you want to give those countries money? They would say absolutely not. Well, then you need to go off fossil fuels, really. And I'm just looking at Gemini here to see how the government are floating ideas this week. The UK government has introduced several rapid response measures this week aimed at accelerating energy independence as the conflict in the Middle East drives wholesale gas prices to a 13-month high. I mean, it's only the 13th month since we had the last crisis, really, I suppose, because of the gas. I mean, what happens is, like I say, it's an international gas price, so it doesn't matter how much gas we produce in the North Sea. That has to be sold at the international price, so we pay the international price, whereas at least if they get it from the North Sea, whoever's drilled that, they're making an absolute fortune. Whereas the way it could really be is we could all have solar and battery, we could bring our own prices down in our own houses each, and it would never be a crisis again, and it'd be forever, really. So the primary focus has been on de-risking the UK from international fossil fuel price volatility by fast-tracking domestic renewable projects. So here are the key ideas floated. And remember, Germany's already done the dash for solar since 2022 or something. I think Orban was the first in Europe in 2018 or whatever. Plug-in solar for households. Apparently you can get solar panels that you can just plug in. They've got plug-in sockets, and so you can use that, get it straight. It'll have an AC to DC converter and that, probably a transformer, etc. And they cost about £400. Apparently in Germany they're going big for them now. And you can just hang them over your balcony or put them in your garden, that sort of thing. And it'll probably have a cable coming from it etc. In a significant shift, the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero announced it will make portable plug-in solar panels available in UK shops within months. And we're talking about Lidl, IKEA, Tesco, Amazon. You know, they could have had these a year or 2 or 3 ago. They could have had them a long time ago, probably. But the government hadn't allowed them for some reason. Target specifically aimed at renters and flat owners who cannot install traditional rooftop solar. Mechanism: these panels can be placed on balconies or in gardens and plugged directly into a standard main socket to reduce grid electricity consumption. And what I would do here is I would probably get one of those portable batteries. You can get quite big ones. There's one that's now, it's not made of lithium. It's made from salt, sodium chloride, and yeah, you can charge that up. I don't know how much it holds, say like 100 milliamp hours. I don't know. I'll try and find it. Actually, it's sodium ion, and these things are like the size of a, I don't know, a storage. No, how could I call it? Like 3 shoe boxes or something like that, you know. So Bluetti was the one I was looking at, because I think they're the first ones to pioneer a lithium-free consumer energy storage battery using sodium ion. So it wasn't sodium chloride, it's sodium ion. And it's called the Pioneer NA. It's only about £800 or something. So what's it using? Yeah. Sodium ion batteries use salt-based chemistry instead of lithium. And apparently you can use them at much lower temperatures. But I would be interested because sodium's very common and lithium isn't. So I just want to look at the size of it. And they're saying that the battery capacity is 900 watt hours. So if you were using something at a kilowatt hour, you would only get 50 minutes out of that or something. But nevertheless, AC output, you would get 50. You can get 1500 watts max, so that's 1.5 kilowatts. So that would power well, I don't know, a heater, a 1 kilowatt heater, something like that. I'm just looking at it anyway, just to give you an example of where we are with the tech. I mean, it's better to have something like a Tesla Powerwall in your house, but if you're looking for something portable, like if you live in a rented flat or something, maybe it's something like this. I mean, it's saying there that one of their lithium power stations had a 3,000 watt hour, has a 3,000 watt hour capacity, battery capacity. That was the NA300. Anyway, what you could do is sort of get a small solar panel and try, say in your flat or in your garden, try and charge it up that way. I don't know how well that would get on, because I don't know enough about it. Yeah, like I say, the government have been holding back these sort of movable solar panels, plug-in solar panels. I mean, you can get smaller ones, you know, for anywhere, Decathlon or whatever, but we're talking about ones that are, I don't know, but maybe a metre wide and something like that. Probably less than that, but foldable probably. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But then you can put them up anywhere and just plug into them. So it's a significant shift apparently, so they got it wrong again in my opinion. It doesn't surprise me. Labour and Keir Starmer always get it wrong, usually. He's the only Prime Minister I've ever disliked. So the target specifically aimed at renters and flat owners who cannot install traditional rooftop solar. These panels can be placed on balconies or in gardens and plugged directly into a standard main socket to reduce grid electricity consumption. I mean, they'd be really good for, charging your mobile devices, things like that, but they can do a lot more than that because they've got a reasonable amount of power. I mean, not enough to run your washing machine or anything. I think for most people, the thing that uses most power is probably something like a washing machine, which might use like 2.5 kilowatts maximum on the spin cycle or something like that. You know, heating and motors are the things that take the most electricity. I mean, a TV only takes about 80 watts now, so you could probably use this with your TV for about, well, it depends if it was sunny really, but a really sunny day probably for about 9 hours or something, you know, I don't know, but I'm just guessing. If you had the solar panel in the right place. But 80 watts is nothing, you know, whereas your washing machine might take 2.5 kilowatts max on the spin cycle. Your heating, if it's electricity, if you get a 2-bar heater, that's 2 kilowatts usually. If you've got a big electric heater, that could be 2 kilowatts, maybe. So that's the sort of things, cooking. But things like a fridge only uses like 120 watts, and that's when it's on, because a lot of time it's not taking anything, mate. So yeah, and I'm looking at the other things they're saying here. The Future Homes Standard update. The government confirmed that from later this year, the Future Homes Standard will be strictly enforced, requiring solar panels and clean heating, such as heat pumps, as a default standard for the majority of new build homes in England. This is intended to ensure new housing stock is not locked into gas dependency. And it's taken a crisis for them to do this, you know. Probably before that they were thinking, well, Reform are going on about net zero, and their voters don't like that. You know, it's all packaged in. They might be voting on mass migration, but they also, most people seem to say on the right or left, they seem to all agree as a bloc on lots of things, which I don't understand myself really, you know. I mean, I'm all over the place, so I just don't agree with parties, party hampers. I believe in direct democracy like Switzerland. Yeah, they have quarterly referendums all the time, 8 referendums every quarter, that sort of thing. So, and for those who don't like that sort of thing, like Nigel Farage and that, I would say, did you like the Brexit referendum? Because David Cameron was the only referendum gambler. Britain's only had 4 referendums since World War II. Probably we never had any before that even. But 3 of them were under David Cameron, and the only other one was to join the European Economic Community in 1974. So I think we should be having referendums all the time. But yeah, David Cameron, he was a, how can I take it? He was a insider trader gambler, in the sense he thought he knew that there was no chance of losing the referendums, but he knew it was a powerful way to show that he had the public behind him. And in the first one he won easily, which is ironic because it was proportional representation, which Nigel Farage supported, and so did I, but it only got about 20% support. That was to get the Lib Dems into government. And then the other 3, of course, is history, like the Scotland one. No, the other 2. The Scotland one, which he nearly lost. He took that one on because at the time, 29% supported independence in 2011. And of course, he nearly lost it because it was 45% at the time, it turned out. And then, of course, he lost the Brexit one. He thought he would win it, but he lost it. So he didn't believe in direct democracy. He was an odds-on gambler, he thought, but he got it wrong. So, yeah. So what am I talking about that anyway? So Future Home Standard update. So that's going to be the standard in England. Yeah, we need to get off gas. And if you're saying, no, we keep fossil fuels or whatever, if you're on the right saying keep fossil fuels, I would say, do you want these countries to keep being ultra wealthy every day on fossil fuels? Is that what you want? You know, I would use that angle to try and convince a Daily Mail reader, because they're actually looking at it from you could say a dislike angle or a hate angle even, you know, like if you look at it, then maybe they'd think, oh, I didn't realise. I mean, the thing is, we should all be on green energy anyway because it's win, 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 win. I mean, even Donald Trump says he wants clean energy, but again, he's gone fossil fuel big. He's gone drill, baby, drill or whatever because he feels the voters on the right like it. He might like it as well, I don't know, but it's just a false thing, me, you know. And I think it's also ironic that Trump might stop his bombing of Iran because Republican voters, MAGA voters in the US are not happy about their petrol price going up, like, you know, 10p or 20p. They've already got a really cheap price there. But, I mean, they're not dependent on oil. I don't know how it would actually affect them. Maybe it's a knock-on because everything, you know, tankers, oil tankers, tankers that go around the world, they all use oil, they all use fossil fuel. So everything's going to go up, you know, everything that's made that's not using clean energy. It's going to go up in price, you know, even your favourite biscuits or whatever. So, and here's the third thing that Labour are doing at the moment, in panic. Wasted wind discounts. A new trial launching this winter will offer discounted energy bills to households and businesses located near wind farms. Currently, the grid sometimes pays wind farms to turn off constraint payments, which costs maybe about £1 billion, when they produce more than the local network can handle. The plan, instead of paying them to stop, the government will allow suppliers to offer that excess power for free or at a deep discount to locals in areas like Scotland and the east of England. So people who are near a wind farm will probably benefit from this. So that's the way it should have always been. You should always, the NIMBYs, you should always bribe them basically with free energy or whatever. And four, they're accelerating the Warm Homes Plan. The government is looking to front load the £15 billion Warm Home Plan. This includes a new call for evidence on how to spend the remaining £3.3 billion of the fund, with a heavy emphasis on rapid solar and insulation rollouts to 5 million homes to shield them from the July price cap rise, which analysts predict could jump by roughly £160 to £200. Yeah, I mean, I think they should give everybody solar panels, basically, because it's cheaper than giving everybody a energy bill cut, which goes to the energy retailers or the generators, even though the generators are making a fortune. And the other thing that Dale Vince says that the Tories, around about 2018 when we had a price spike, the Tories capped the maximum that the retailers could make at 5%. Before that, they could make their own price, so they could make 20%, whatever they wanted. The Tories capped that at 5%. For some reason, that wasn't regarded a bad thing. I mean, it sounds very socialist and nanny state to me, but yeah, the Tories done that, but they didn't do it for the generators. So the generators can make as much as they like from a crisis. And the main reason that I think they make the crisis is just it's an opportunity to put the price up, really. I mean, Labour are saying that they're going to watch all the petrol pump stations to make sure they're not putting their prices up ridiculously, which they usually do. And apparently the government's going to have a petrol price watch website. I don't know why they haven't had these for years, you know. I mean, we've got these affiliate sites like Money Supermarket, Money Saving Expert, well, he's with one, I can't remember what it is. He sold out to one for 18 million or something. Yeah, we've got all these affiliates which make fortunes being affiliates. Why doesn't the government have their own electricity price website? You could maybe even buy from it. They could get the affiliate price or pass it on to the consumer. And if they got the affiliate, they could put it into the coffers, you know. Because why rely on the private sector to give us comparison sites? Because we can't totally rely on them. They should have their own comparison site. And they're talking about that for petrol prices now anyway. as a watch thing, I don't know about a buy. Well, you have to go there to buy anyway. So, um, and number 5, they're looking at market reform and anti-profiteering. Following a COBR meeting on March 23rd, the Prime Minister and Chancellor discussed giving the Competition and Markets Authority additional teeth to prevent price gouging by energy firms during the crisis, moving some policy costs, levies, off energy bills and onto general taxation to provide immediate relief to consumers while maintaining green investment. Yeah. And personally, I think everyone should refer to Dale Vince on energy, not least because he is a generator and a seller, an energy seller as well. So it would be in his financial interests not to say anything about, making exorbitant money in times of crisis out of energy. But he acts as really emperor's new clothes situation. That's the way he acts. I think from his point of view, he's worth about 120 million in wealth, and he doesn't really need the money, so he just wants people to get a good, fair deal, really. So, yeah, that's the way I view him. You don't need to take up whatever he says, but definitely I would have him as a advisor. And Labour don't seem to have him as an advisor. Really Keir Starmer should have him as an advisor, in my opinion. I would make him energy minister, apparently. Well, I don't know all I can say so far. He's not keen on, heat pumps, because electricity costs 3 times the price of gas. So if you're replacing your gas system with electricity, it has to be under 3 times efficient for you to even start reducing the cost. And he says they don't make that really in practice. They can make maybe 2.8 maximum, but I mean, it is better if at least under electricity you could get it onto a green grid or whatever. You could maybe even supply it by solar, but apparently they only heat water to about 55 degrees, whereas gas heats water to 70 degrees. So that's why I've heard a few people saying that their showers are cold or their house is cold, or it just doesn't reach the same level. So I think it's pretty fair and all that, so I always listen to him. You can follow him on X. I don't think he does a good enough job of promoting his ideas. I think he should have his own website for his ideas on energy. I don't mean all his political ideas, just on energy. And then the government can look at it, refer to it. Others can refer to it. Because I think his voice should be heard, but he doesn't even reply to others in X posts. He could reply to Keir Starmer in X posts, but he just sticks to his own X post thing. So he doesn't get the views that I think he should get. I think probably the best way to get views on X is to post replies in other people's posts, like Keir Starmer or whatever. So he's been vocal this week about the Middle East crisis pushes gas prices to a 13-month high. His primary argument is that the UK's energy crisis is actually a market design failure rather than a resource shortage. So that's what he's saying. It's the market design, our internal market, the way we set up how we buy and sell energy, how we produce it. It's not really to do with the Hormuz crisis or whatever. Last time it was the Ukraine crisis that put us up. This time it's the Hormuz crisis. So here's what he suggests, breaking the link. Vince's most urgent demand, which was discussed in high-level meetings with Energy Secretary Ed Miliband on March 25th, is to stop tying the price of electricity to the price of gas. Yeah. Yeah, I've been going on about this a few times, because I just heard about this, probably from Dale Vince. I maybe heard about it before that, but I didn't understand. But Dale Vince being a generator, he's being emperor's new clothes here, because he's telling you, and it is amazing that Reform haven't spotted us or anything. I think, has Richard Tice mentioned it? I don't think he has. Sometimes Richard Tice mentions sensible ideas, but I don't think he has actually. The problem, currently the most expensive fuel to produce electricity is usually gas, but it sets a price for all electricity on the grid, including cheap wind and solar, because apparently wind and solar are cheaper than gas to produce electricity. But Nigel Farage doesn't seem to be aware of that. But what happens is every half hour when retailers buy their electricity from the generators, they've got to take whatever's on offer, and whatever's the highest on offer, it sets a price for all of them. And so usually they may get maybe 60% wind, 20% solar. They may need 5% gas. Well, that 5% gas sets a price. So, I mean, I checked the prices a while ago. I can't really remember them. I don't know. I'm just giving you an example. It might be like, say, 60 pence a kilowatt for wind, and for gas it may be £1.20 a kilowatt. They all get £1.20 every half hour because of that. So that's what's causing it. He's saying to break that link, and I'm wondering why nobody's done it before. Somebody said it's because they don't want the gas companies to go out of business, because most of us still depend on gas to heat our homes. So I don't know if that's something to do with it at all. So the solution, he is calling for a pay-as-bid system. This would allow renewable generators to sell their power at their actual lower costs, which he claims could save UK households and businesses billions of pounds immediately. And then he's talking about a fair deal for the North Sea. This is something he's floated for a while. Say, about 6 months ago he started saying this, I don't know. But he has surprisingly suggested using the renewable energy funding model, the contracts for difference, for North Sea oil and gas operators. Instead of the current volatile market or absurd new drilling, the government would offer fossil fuel companies a fixed guarantee price. This would cap their profits at a reasonable level, he suggests 10%, when global prices spike due to the Iran crisis, effectively turning windfall profits into consumer savings before they even reach the bill. Yeah, that's it exactly. I mean, and I think he's saying that so that they can wind down, and they've got a fixed price so they can wind down in an orderly manner. I think that's his long-term vision. And he's rejecting new North Sea drilling. He has slammed calls from the fossil fuel lobby to expand North Sea drilling. He describes new drilling as a non-solution because any new oil or gas wouldn't hit the system for 5 years and would, here's a bit important, but still be sold at global market prices, doing nothing to lower UK bills today. And in his plan B for home heating, Vince has recently renewed his criticism of the government's heavy focus on heat pumps, calling it the heat pump illusion. His alternative, he is pushing for a national green gas programme, biomethane made from grass. That's what he's starting to do, arguing it is more cost effective for the 6 million UK homes that he claims cannot easily be retrofitted for heat pumps. Yeah, he's starting to produce biomethane, which can be used in our gas boilers apparently. So we would at least be getting the green gas, as he's calling it. And he calls for reforming the national grid for a profit cap. Calls for a profit cap on the monopoly network operators, the companies that own the wires and pipes. He argues that while energy retailers have price caps, the network operators are making outrageous margins, and that price cap was brought in by the Tories. But the network operators are making outrageous margins, and I think that includes him. So it would be in his wealthy interest not to mention this. That inflates standing charges on customer bills. And the way the government usually deal with these energy crises is they let the energy creators get massive profits. But our bills go up, and the government subsidise our bills, which is basically subsidising the energy. I don't know if it's the retailers or the producers. And then they also do a windfall tax. That's how the government try and get the money back. But it means, so what they're saying now, or what I'm saying now, is if we had solar and all that, we could just keep our prices cheap forever anyway, or even free. At some point, we're going to be free energy. I'm talking within 10 years, in my opinion. But if the government get their act together and all that, I think we're going to have free energy within 10 years. Solar panels, batteries, that'll be the main part. We might not even need wind farms and stuff, but I would still like to be plugged into the grid, as a top-up or even just a fallback. But, yeah, so the last energy crisis was the Ukraine one, and here's what the government did. Gemini's saying that the government spent tens of billions to lower bills, but it's only managed to get back about, say, 50% of that cost through windfall taxes on energy producers. So it's a sort of cycle, but really we're the losers in a way. I mean, it's the taxpayer that's paying for it, so whereas if you had solar and battery, even if the taxpayer was paying for them, it would be a one-off thing or a once every 15 years or something, depending how long a solar panel and battery would last. But even that, you would probably want to update your solar panels yourself because it was so cheap anyway. You would break the link totally. So I'm just looking, the energy price guarantee, this is what they gave us in October 22 to March 24. So that was like a year and a half. That cost 27 billion. That included heating Rishi Sunak's heated swimming pool. And then the energy bill relief scheme, that was an equivalent price cap for businesses and charities. So we were giving them a subsidy as well. That was £7.4 billion. Energy bill support scheme, the universal £400 discount sent to all households, including to Rishi Sunak itself, etc. £12 billion. So that was just 12 billion. I mean, when Keir Starmer, his welfare bill, he was looking to save 8 billion. I don't know if that was a year or a one-off. And then when he was wanting to do away with the universal subsidy on fuel for pensioners, that cost about 2 billion. And I agreed with cutting away with that. You just shouldn't do it. There's other ways, to help the poor, just help the poor, target it. So that would have been 2 billion, whereas this thing cost us 12 billion, it's not even in the same. And remember, this is just after COVID as well, when we've spent, I don't know how many billions. I don't know how we're in a massive depression, really. It's a miracle, really. The cost of living payments, targeted grants for pensioners and low-income groups, £12.1 billion. Energy profits levy, so this is how they tried to get it back. And they used a windfall tax on the North Sea oil and gas profits at a 78% rate. That was a one-off thing, I think. And they get 19.6 billion from that. So that was about... I'll see in a minute. And then electricity generator levy, a tax on excess revenues from low-carbon generators. And I'm guessing this isn't on the public, but it might be, I don't know. But they got 2.3 billion a year on that. And so the total spent was 58.5 billion. And remember that Liz Truss wanted to make it even longer, that energy thing. I think she wanted to make it 2 years. So that would have been like 70 billion. And they reckon they recovered about 28 billion. So that one thing, we lost that. And ironically, any time there's a fossil fuel crisis, the green energy producers make the most money because they're making it cheaper anyway. And with gas setting the price, they're getting the gap between as total profit. So it costs them less to make, and they're also getting that profit gap because our energy market, the electricity, all comes at the dearest price, whatever's cost the dearest every half hour. And it's always gas that's the dearest. So that is ironic. Unlike the oil and gas windfall tax, which targets fossil fuel extraction, so that must have been that other tax windfall. The EGL was designed to capture extraordinary returns from companies that produce electricity from sources where the cost of production didn't rise, but the selling price did, because electricity prices are currently pegged to the high price of gas. So who paid that? They generate electricity from nuclear, renewable, biomass, or energy from waste sources. It'd be hydro as well, probably, I would guess. They generate more than 50 gigawatt hours of electricity per year. Their extraordinary receipts, revenue earned above roughly £75 per megawatt hour, exceed £10 million in an accounting period. So we know what kind of companies that was then, really. There was also exemptions, new projects from post-2023, CFD holders, that's the contracts for difference. Because these projects already have a fixed price agreement with the government, they don't benefit from high market spikes, so there are no extraordinary profits to tax. Battery storage and pumped hydro storage are exempt to encourage grid flexibility. Smaller community energy projects or microgenerators falling under the 50 gigawatt hour threshold. So, yeah. And I'm just looking at how much the COVID stay-at-home wage cost. Our government paid people to stay at home, which I support. I think the way they handled COVID, again, this means I'm not on the right again. I think it's a sign of a country that cares and long-term will work out for the best. And even hedge funds managers, although they don't bother about countries, they'll keep in mind, well, Britain and America were really good to their citizens. They care about their citizens. That should make a good society, etc. I think mass migration might make that different, but if you took that variable out of it, so they'll be looking at that, although they'll be looking at it, squeezing these countries out of money any way they can, including taxpayers moving all their money overseas, etc. But they'll see them as probably the shining lights of the COVID period, in the sense that they cared about all their society. That's how I see it. So that cost, well, the employed staff thing cost 70 billion, and I'm surprised at that. I thought it would have been a lot more. And the self-employment one cost about 28 billion, and it supported it's like 14.6 million people. So the total wage support was 98 billion. So that's a massive debt we've got, and I don't know how we're not in the depression for decades because of that. Then we had the energy price, but as I've just shown you, the energy thing cost us about 56 billion. So, I mean, it was almost as much as COVID, and now they're talking about now again, we might have another energy where the government are going to subsidise our energy bills. So we might have another 50 billion thingy. But like Dale Vince and me are saying, this should be the time to switch to give everybody a solar panel instead, in my opinion. Especially Reform. This is a chance for Reform to show their common sense as entrepreneurs, and that would be win-win-win in every way, including anybody who looks at fossil fuel generators as a hate thing. I'm talking about overseas or whatever, rather than calling it net zero, which sounds like a stick. Well, the COVID thing cost 98 billion. Well, they thought it would. That was a headline cost, but apparently it's estimated to be around 75 to 80 billion it cost. This is because the government recollected a portion of that money immediately through income tax and national insurance contributions paid on those supported wages. Alright, so they were still paying tax and national insurance on your on the money they were giving you to stay at home. Alright, I didn't know that. And then there was a fraud gap. HMRC estimates that between £3.5 to £7 billion was lost to error and fraud across these two schemes. I mean, personally, I would imagine it's a lot more, you know. We'll never know, maybe, I don't know. As of early 26, recovery task forces are still working to claw back these funds, though only about £1 to £2 billion has been successfully returned to the taxpayer. The National Audit Office concluded that without this spend, UK unemployment would have likely peaked at over 10%. Instead, it peaked at 5.2%. For perspective, the wage support for COVID cost nearly twice as much as the 22-24 energy subsidy, which was around £58 billion. However, unlike the energy crisis, where the government recovered nearly half the cost via windfall taxes, there was no equivalent recollection mechanism for COVID spending other than standard taxation. And I'm just looking to see how much a similar energy subsidy scheme would cost for today's crisis. Gemini said it would cost a lot lower this time, but still represents a multi-billion-pound hit. And they reckon it would cost between 15 to 20 billion for 1 year to freeze bills at the current level through the winter. And I suppose the main thing is through the winter, because that's when we're all using heating. You know, most of us don't use any heating, maybe for 6 months of the year. So, yeah. So at the moment, we're coming out of winter, really. We're out of it. So why the 26 crisis would cost less than 22? The original 24 support package cost nearly 60 billion. A 26 version is cheaper for three main reasons. The UK grid now has roughly 15% more wind and solar capacity than it did in 22. This means for every £1 the gas price rises, the weighted cost to the grid doesn't rise as steeply as it used to. So there we go, although the retailer price does, I suppose, because we all buy at gas price. In 22, bills jumped from £1,200 to over £4,000 in market value. In 26, the July cap is projected to hit, say, £1,972. The gap the government has to pay to keep bills at the current level, £1,641, is smaller. But yeah, that might go up, and they do it every 3 months, don't they? So if it's still going on by winter, this war, then it might go up or whatever. The government has already moved roughly £100 to £150 of green levies off bills and onto general taxation, meaning the bill they are subsidising is already leaner. Yeah, so there we go. So they reckon it might cost 20 billion if they do a similar scheme this time, but I don't think they're going to do that this time. So Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has indicated on March 24th that she has no intention of repeating the universal £2,500 cap from the 22 era. Instead, the government is floating more targeted and cheaper options, like a social tariff. Rather than a universal freeze, a social tariff for low-income and vulnerable households would cost only maybe 4 to 6 billion. The Energy Guarantee, a plan where every home gets a free or very cheap block of essential energy with high usage, luxury energy priced at the full market rate. Yeah, Rishi Sunak's heated swimming pool. This could be revenue neutral if the high rate prices are set correctly. And business support, unlike 2022, there is currently no plan for a broad business subsidy, as the government believes firms have had 4 years to invest in efficiency and on-site renewables. And yeah, well, like I say, I think they should just give us all solar panels, you know. I'm just checking here, what if they gave us all solar panels instead? It would be cheaper in long term. But apparently it would cost us like 250 billion. So it's not really. That would be for a 4 kilowatt solar system, which costs at the moment roughly 6,500 to 8,500. Yeah, so that would be off-putting. But I'm right about it being long term. Once installed, the fuel from sunlight is free. As Elon Musk says, all energy comes from the sun. Well, we all say that actually, but he points it out. The average UK home would save between £500 to £900 per year on bills at 26 prices. It takes about 7 to 10 years for the panels to pay back for themselves. That annoys me when they talk about the payback time, because do people think about payback time when they're buying an SUV or when they're putting in a fitted kitchen or whatever? If every home had solar, the UK's demand for imported gas would plummet, making us far less vulnerable to price spikes caused by Middle Eastern conflicts. Are you listening, Daily Mail readers? Why hasn't it happened? Physical hurdles. 3 physical hurdles. The grid traffic jam. Our current national grid wasn't built for millions of homes to send power back into the wires at the same time on a sunny Tuesday. Upgrading the local substations to handle universal solar would cost an estimated £50 to £100 billion extra. Roof suitability. About 20% of UK homes aren't suitable for traditional solar. This is why the government is currently floating the plug-in solar balcony panels mentioned earlier. I think everyone should have some solar panels in their house, like I say, like these plug-in ones, or even just the small ones to try charging your mobile devices, things like that, if you've got enough sun. I mean, you can get them out of Decathlon on Amazon. Just experiment with them and get used to them. You can even charge up your small battery power banks, Labour shortage. We currently don't have enough qualified electricians to install 29 million systems quickly. At current rates, it would take decades to finish, etc. And what Dale Vince proposes is a middle ground solution. He suggests the state-owned GB Energy, which is about to come into fruition, I think, should pay for and own the panels on your roof. So GB Energy would fit them, and you wouldn't own them, the panels. And he's saying you get a significantly lower bill, and the government keeps the extra profit from the energy you don't use to pay off the initial costs of the panels. This way, the taxpayer doesn't have to provide a handout, but the homeowner gets an immediate discount. I mean, I would like, in a way, maybe at some point, if the owner could own them, long term. That's what I think, because I would also like to upgrade them myself and stuff, warm home plans. Instead of doing all homes, I mean, Dale Vince doesn't believe you should have a battery, or he doesn't feel. Personally, I do. I like the idea of a battery. Instead of doing all homes, the government has this is what they're actually doing, launched the £15 billion Warm Homes Plan this year. It aims to upgrade 5 million homes by 2030 by offering free installation for low-income families worth up to £12,000, including a battery. Well, I agree with that, as long as it doesn't include a heat pump. I think it includes a heat pump, so interest-free loans for everyone else to spread that £8,000 cost over 10 years, so the savings on the bill pay the loan. Yeah, so that's the sort of things we're looking at, like I say, it really does my head in, that reform, and the right are anti-renewables. It just seems just for an emotional reason. And so I would say to the left, you're pitching it to them wrong by talking about net zero, the climate change. You should be pointing out you're going to get cheaper energy, maybe even free energy, maybe even you might get money. You can get money now as well to put energy back in. There's a certain scheme. Tesla's even going to start the scheme in Britain as well. They've applied, but others already do it, like OVO or whatever. And you can even put in a charge of your car battery at peak times or whatever, and they'll use it and pay you, give you money. But yeah, we should already be there. Every entrepreneur and capitalist should be electricity crazy, because you can tell that when horse and carts were being replaced by cars, all the right wing would have been in favour of cars because they can visually see it, whereas with this you can't visually really see it, or in fact they feel it makes it look visually worse. But I don't think. I think wind farms are quite nice. I wish wind farms weren't there because they've got CCTVs on them, and it brings workers into the countryside. And yeah, I would prefer if they weren't there, but they're not. They're quite nice looking, and quite a lot of wind farms let you go through. The public go through them, and so you can go through on your bike, etc., or whatever, or walk. But solar is the future, in my opinion. As I say, like Orban done it in 2018 and that. All right, that's me. Okay, bye bye.